This is how you share your games on PS.
6. I played Assassin's Creed Black Flag on the PlayStation 3, so it's been quite some time to put it lightly. And with the Black Flag releasing just around the corner, I wanted to brush up on the original to of course draw some comparisons with the remake. I quickly looked it up on the PlayStation Store and it was available for $17. That is a 13-year-old game that's still $17 on the PlayStation Store. So I started looking for a used physical copy, and while I found plenty of cheaper options from third-party retailers, I also asked a friend of mine and luckily he had a copy sitting around, so I ended up getting it practically for free. And Sony was like,
"How dare you?"
and announced that they are ending physical disc production in January 2028 for all new games releasing on the PlayStation consoles. And I think it goes without saying that this is also what most of the gaming companies have wanted for a very long time. I mean, just look at Xbox. They've been trying to get rid of physical copies ever since Xbox One, when they imposed predatory DRMs on disc, to which PlayStation made one of the greatest responses ever, but I guess they've lived long enough to see themselves become the villain. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that discs were the best thing ever. A lot of people have been downloading games digitally for a reason, and that reason is simple: convenience. You don't have to leave your house just to buy a game. Hell, you don't even have to get up from your couch to insert a disc into the console. All you have to do is download the game and play it. That's it. I primarily bought discs in the PS3 and the PS4 era, but near the end of the last gen, I had started buying digitally as well. Especially the 80% discount on the Ultimate Edition of RDR2 motivated me to keep a lookout on the PlayStation Store. Not to mention, buying digitally also makes more sense recently because the physical copies are nothing more than a license key to access a game, and you often need an internet connection anyway to download the game itself. But even then, you can't just deny the importance of physical copies, especially for something as expensive as games. The physical copy of a game still holds some value for the customer, as they have control over what they want to do with the disc. I mean, you can lend the thing, give it away for free, sell it, burn it, shred it, it's your call, whatever you want to do with the game. With digital copies, that isn't possible, and 007 First Light is what really drove that home for me. Now, I like the game, but I don't think it's worth $70, and the sad part is that I can't trade the game or even sell it to get at least some of my money back. I'm just stuck with it unless Sony decides to take it down, but more on that just a bit. This is one of the biggest problems with buying digital copies. Now yes, it's true that the world has moved to digital only, no one's buying movies or music in physical form anymore. So on paper, the claim that 80% of the game sales are digital makes perfect sense. But the sales data for the consoles and the leaks from Insomniac Games tells a different and a very interesting story. The thing is, back in 2024, more than 80% of the PS5 sold were the disc edition. When the PS5 Pro launched as digital only, people actually went out and bought the separate disc drivers, causing a shortage which Sony never anticipated. And it shows that just a couple of years ago, when Sony was actually testing the waters, a vast majority of the people wanted to have a console with the disc driver. It was only in 2025 when the digital edition reportedly jumped up to around 49% for the year, and what's crazy is that this was the year when the overall sales for consoles were down anyway. So no, there's no way in hell that digital consoles suddenly pulled ahead. That's why I think it's safe to say that a vast majority of the people own the disc version of the PS5 still to this day. And even if we take the 80% digital games figure at face value, which I think is a purposeful misrepresentation of numbers, all it really shows is that players want to have an option, because they know there will come a time when they can find a physical copy of a game for way cheaper than on the PlayStation Store. Now let's talk about the 80% figure, because I'm not buying it. The Insomniac leaks from a few years back show that most first-party games sold were actually physical. Sackboy, Ratchet & Clank, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man, all these games sold 70% physically. And just recently, according to some reports in the UK, the Sony first-party games like God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 both sold a majority of copies physically, with digital only making up 46% of the sales for Spider-Man 2 and only 24% for God of War Ragnarok. Astro Bot sales were 55% physical in the UK and nearly 60% in Europe just last year. So I don't really understand how that number can suddenly jump up to 80%. And after some digging around, here's the only explanation that actually makes some sense. That 80% figure isn't just counting AAA games, it's counting everything: Fortnite, Arc Raiders, Apex Legends, games that were never available physically in the first place. Not to mention, Fortnite is still one of the most played games on the platform, which alone would obviously skew the graph. Then there's Call of Duty, which is another online live service game that has a massive PlayStation audience. So once again, most of the spending happens online with seasons and bundles and whatever else goes on in that game. On top of that, there are DLCs and smaller indie games like Never Alone that are only available online. And now pair all that with AAA sales being down across the board in the first place. I mean, what do you think is the reason for all the layoffs and studio closures? It's not just bloated budgets and bad management. The thing is that players aren't just buying games at full price anymore. Most of them wait for a discount or buy used copies from retailers, which is something Sony conveniently ignored, and of course they would, because those sales are a straight up loss for them. And considering how a vast majority of the people own the disc version of the PS5, I'd wager that the market for used games is absolutely huge. Now, just for the sake of this argument, even if we say that yeah, 80% of the people buy games digitally, there are around 130 million monthly active users on the PlayStation Network, so that means about 26 million people still buy their games physically. And 26 million is not a small, negligible number. You cannot just simply ignore 26 million people. Sony just took that 80% figure because it sounds big on paper and decided to kill discs. I mean, they could have easily just scaled back, cut disc production and disc edition consoles by 70 to 80% and let the market decide the rest. But of course they wouldn't do that because eliminating those options was the goal from the very start. So one thing's for sure, this is not Sony just going with the market trends. Just like Microsoft, this is Sony trying to force a decision down our throats because it benefits them. Just recently over the earnings call, despite the fact that Sony lost nearly $1 billion on failed live service games like Marathon, they still hit record profits because of the PlayStation Store, which is such a massive cash cow that it completely swallowed the Bungie disaster and still left them with a ton of money. Now, with the rising hardware costs, there are reports that the PS6 will cost around $8,000. I'm not a PC guy, but I think you can get a fairly decent PC for that price point. Just recently, Linus made a PC at the same price as the Steam machine and it ran games just as well, if not better. Sony knows that selling the PS6 at that price point will be an uphill battle, especially when their first-party exclusives suck ass too. So instead of trying to win new players over, they're just trying to trap as many existing players as possible on the platform so they can keep squeezing them till the end of times. With the PlayStation 6, players will be entirely at the mercy of the PS Store. Without any aftermarket or any sort of price competition, Sony alone decides the prices of your games and when and even if they go on a sale. And what a lot of people overlook is that without said competition, there's no reason for PlayStation to discount anything like they used to. The only reason you have been enjoying some decent deals on the PlayStation Store is because they knew that players can find better deals outside, and to keep you on their platform, they needed enticing offers. Without the physical copies in the market, they don't need that anymore. Now, yes, you can argue that physical copies have been dead on PC for a very long time with players just downloading games from Steam, but there's a difference. PC is still an open platform and PC gamers have a lot of options. There's GOG, there's Steam, there's itch.io, there's Epic Store, and then there are some more websites that can get you games even for free. People just prefer to use Steam because it's the best service on the platform. But the point is that you have the option to shop around. On the PlayStation, you're logged on the platform with no other choice, and let's not forget, they can just take away your games at any time. Just recently, Sony also announced that they'll be deleting more than 500 movies from PlayStation accounts users already paid for. Due to a licensing agreement with Studio Canal, PlayStation users will lose access to over 500 of their purchased movies after September 1st, 2026. The total number of titles affected by this update is 550. And no one gets a refund. Sony comfortably keeps all that money in their pockets. I mean, just imagine, man, you bought a car for like 50 grand and one day it just drives itself back to the dealership over some licensing issue and you don't get a penny back. That's exactly what can happen to your games too, because you're not buying a game, you're just buying a license to access the game, which is something the Stop Killing Games movement is fighting against. And with everything going digital, God knows we need them to succeed more than ever right now. We need actual laws and regulations in place to protect consumer rights, because what's happening right now is the best implementation of you'll own nothing and be happy. The only problem for these corporations is that we're not happy, not at all. The backlash has thankfully gone nuclear. Players have been cancelling their PS Plus subscriptions en masse to the point where Sony is now quietly offering people up to 50% off just to get them to stay subscribed. When a multi-billion-dollar company starts begging people not to leave, that tells you that it might actually be working. And it's not just the gamers that are mad. Sony's actually been fighting this battle in courtrooms for a while now, and this decision to end physical discs just handed the lawyers a whole lot more ammunition. There's already a $2.7 billion lawsuit in the UK representing around 12 million consumers, arguing that Sony's been using the PlayStation Store's monopoly to inflate digital prices for years. What's actually funny is that that case was already underway before any of this, but good luck arguing you're not a monopoly when you just kill the only alternative to your store. There's also a $7 million lawsuit in the US from 2019 where Sony was caught blocking third-party retailers from selling digital vouchers. Now that lawsuit has been settled and Sony has agreed to pay the amount, but dude, think about it. They were blocking competition even 7 years ago and now they've decided to just delete them entirely. Man, I hope the next settlement is like $7 billion, but anyways. In the Netherlands, the Fair PlayStation case has been going after Sony for over 400 million euros on behalf of 1.7 million Dutch users over what they're calling the Sony tax. In an exclusive statement to WCCF Tech, Lucia Melkertz, chair of SMC, the group suing PlayStation, explained, "The end of physical discs removes the last place where a PlayStation game could still be bought and sold at a competitive price. No discs means no second-hand market and no alternative to the PlayStation Store. So from 2028, Sony alone decides what a game costs and even how long you're allowed to use it. That's exactly the harm or fair PlayStation claim is about. A price can never be fair when the buyer is left with no ownership and no alternative." And that's exactly what I've been saying as well. Damn man, I'm kinda smarter than I thought, but anyways. Now on top of all the backlash and the lawsuits, the Don't Kill the Disc petition has also blown past 170,000 signatures already, with 50,000 people alone signing it today while I'm writing the script. So the good news is that Sony is now facing pressure not just from frustrated players but also from courts, consumer groups and regulators. By trying to kill physical discs, Sony is actually trying to hit like 4 or 5 birds with one stone, forcing people onto their platform, saving costs and manufacturing, shipping, inventory management, eliminating the middleman entirely, and most importantly, eliminating all choice to gain full control over your hobby. And in typical industry fashion, if this is left unchecked, it'll only get worse down the line, and that's exactly what Sony's relying on. They're relying on you being like, yeah, okay, whatever, I never bought discs anyway. With the ongoing hardware situation, it's safe to say that pretty soon the consoles will see more price hikes from $1,000 to $1,500 to $2,000, and I'm sure the PS6 Pro will end up costing around $2,300. That's when they'll try to push you into the convenient and cheap subscription service to play games you don't own on a console you'll probably have to lease in the first place. And once enough people are locked in, they'll jack the prices up on that too, which is something we've already seen with Game Pass. And this is the textbook definition of enshittification. This is the dystopian future we're looking at if we don't push back. A future where you have to pay a monthly fee just to access your favorite hobby. That's why this matters way too much to ignore, and we have to do everything we can to stop this. Cancel your PS Plus, cancel your GTA 6 pre-orders, and sign the petition, for which you can find the link pinned in the comments down below. I've said this before and I'll say it again, we desperately need more consoles in the market. We need more competition because that's the only solution I see to this whole mess. Otherwise, start saving up $4 grand for a gaming PC, which is a nightmare of its own thanks to Nvidia and Microsoft. Man, you really can't hate these corporations enough, but that's a topic for another video. Anyways, I'll leave you at that. Do share your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think this backlash will actually force Sony to reverse course, or are they too far in to turn back now? Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you found this video valuable. If you want this video to reach more people who are sick and tired of the industry's crap, hit that hype button, share the video with your friends. I'd really appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.